David, looking at that scene from the air as you were arriving in Padang, you can't see any sign, really, of the devastation below.
Tranquil, George. Very tranquil. As we're coming in late afternoon, we had to circle around a couple of times because other military C-130s were landing with supplies. And as we circled around, I looked out the window and it was just like you're going to paradise. Just the late afternoon light, that golden light on the beaches.
What a lie that was.
And what a lie that was, because when you actually get down there and you see the devastation, it's quite the opposite. Every second or third building had been destroyed. And we came across an area where a lot of hotels, I think mainly for tourists, big expensive hotels, beautiful hotels, and they're all in rubble, all down to rubble. It was a very weird experience. And then try to go inside some of the buildings with the experts to find anybody was still alive in there. They were still hoping people were alive at this stage, or to find bodies. And as I was walking around there and filming, they found a handbag, which they picked up, a woman's handbag.
Some sign of life, maybe.
Maybe some sign of life, or somebody had been buried under the rock in there who died, and they found her security card, and they sent somebody off to try to find out whether she was still alive or had got out or whatever.
Yep.
And also Pepsi drinks left on the table with straws. If people...
Yeah, I noticed that in your shot.
Yes.
Probably the people who were drinking that Pepsi were killed.
Probably were killed.
But the Pepsi's still there to remind us.
The Pepsi was still there, and it was just an eerie feeling to think that, you know, a day or so before, that people were sitting there enjoying themselves, and the drinks were still there.
The rescue workers at that stage, David, and it's only a few days after, 2 or 3 days after the actual event, the quake itself, they probably were still hopeful of finding people alive underneath that rubble, which is almost impossible to believe.
At that stage, yes. They thought they heard noises. All the experts, all these people were just waiting on the outside there in their red uniforms, waiting to be called in if they found any movement or any noise. At one stage they thought they did. They sent the people in, stopped the bulldozers, sent them in, but there was nothing.
So where are we going now?
Yes, we are going to the market of the old Chinatown.
Right, and that's all.
I ran into this guy who spoke a bit of English, and he said, "Oh, I lived in Australia." He said, well, he asked me where I was from, and I said, from SBS Australia. And he said, look, it's worse than this. He said, come and I'll show you Chinatown.
So this is all over here, eh?
Yes, this is the most heaviest one. So 3 people got buried here, and then we already take them out, and then the rest.
And shop after shop, house after house, just flattened. Cars flattened. And it's something not many people had been to. He said to me that a lot of experts haven't been here yet. You saw the bulldozers out on the main drag, the main area where the big hotels are, because the roads were wider. Where the Chinatown was, they couldn't get a lot of these trucks into this area to dig up all the rubble.
Oh dear, sir. Very bad, eh? Very bad.
It's very bad.
I met this very refined Indonesian gentleman who spoke a little bit of English, who had a pair of long Bermuda shorts on and a lovely shirt. And he was sitting down having a cigarette in the remains of his hotel on one of the sofas with rubble all around him and stuff. And I said to him, how are you? He said, I am 91 years of age. He said, never seen anything as bad as this. My hotel, he said, I built it in 1967.
So he actually said it was the worst he'd seen?
Yes, yes. And then he said, I've put another extension on my hotel. And I looked out to the left there and it all gone, all this brand new part of the hotel. But what I noticed, George, with him and many of the Indonesians, how relaxed or how they just take it, just accept it and move on and get on with it. It's an amazing thing to see this about, well, this has happened to us, but what we've got to do now is rebuild and start again. He said it's too old for him, he's 91, but his sons will take over and rebuild.
Soon after, David, probably the next day, you saw some pretty awful scenes in the hospital in Padang. The victims, the injuries to kids and older people. Tell us about that. That's not nice, no matter how many times you see it.
Well, as you know, George, and we've both done this, there's a lot of hospitals we've been into, you and I, over the last 40 years of devastation, of earthquakes, or children who've lost limbs, or landmines in wars and things like this. It never changes. It never changes. It's the same thing, particularly children.
Mau cepat sembuh kan? Nah, kalau iya nanam.
And this hospital in Penang had been hit as well by the earthquake, so parts of it were knocked down, parts of it were still operating. And I just walked in, and here are all these children in bed, some of them crying, some of them in shock, with their parents or the nursing staff were there trying to help them, fanning them with little fans because there was no electricity much going, just fanning them there, and they're just laying there in tremendous pain. And you think to yourself, why have these children, just their lives starting? And I came across one little girl who was a beautiful little girl and had one leg poking out with some bandages over it. And I said to her mother, I asked her, I said, hopefully she's all right, it just doesn't look too serious. And she said no, through an interpreter, that they had to amputate her other leg off. And she's about 9, and it hit me all of a sudden that her life's changed forever. That's just one example of hundreds of children. The next day, I wanted to get out of the city. I felt there's enough of the city, but there are outlying areas that people tend to forget about.
Exactly.
Or the experts can't get there for whatever reason, whether they can't get their trucks in, or they're too busy helping the people in the city. And I think, well, hang on, what's the outlying areas? So I tried to get to a place called Pyramid, which was about 3 hours' drive away. On the way, there were bodies in body bags. The smell would remind me very much of war. Waiting in the heat there, was incredibly hot, to be picked up by ambulances and taken to a morgue, hopefully. You see this all the way along, and you see all these houses that are destroyed. But once we got up to the end of this track, there was this big bulldozer digging away there, and I wondered what it was about.
We're looking at those pictures now. It looks a bit like a gigantic sandpit, but what are we actually looking at? We're looking at a burial ground.
That's right, George.
Created by an earthquake and a landslide.
Absolutely, and nothing left of any homes whatsoever. You wouldn't know unless somebody told you.
How many people do they think?
400. This was on a side of a mountain or a hill, and the bulldozers were just digging away quietly.
That's what we're looking at now?
Yes. Trying to find if there was any life there, and they've got to be very careful, of course, because you could end up killing somebody who's still alive from that dreadful earthquake. And they had the sniffer dogs there, people putting their dogs going down, trying to get a sniff if anybody was alive. And then I realised, and somebody told me in broken English, that when the earthquake happened and all the rain and so on just totally destroyed this whole village, nothing left, except for I saw a couple of people walking with an old bedpost or whatever.
That bed that we're looking at is pretty much the only sign that anybody lived there.
If anybody found anything.
And you're talking about 400...
400 people plus. And on the other side of the creek, it was a scene like out of Bali. Beautiful green jungle.
You're looking at it now.
And there's this devastation, and you realise it's just a mass grave.
So probably where those earth movers are working now, as we're looking at it, was exactly like the other side of the valley.
Yes, very similar. And I heard on the way back that they decided to stop looking for people because they said they could be better to spend the money for looking after the living and not looking after the dead, or trying to get the dead out and turn it into a mass grave.
Despite all of this devastation and this death and horrible situation, somehow or other, life manages to go on.
As you and I have seen many, many times over the last 40 years or so, it does. One day I was out where they were digging, looking for people. There was a guy there with an ice cream stand, and the music they play at an ice cream stand, selling ice creams to make a buck. Also on the roads going down to some of this devastation, kids mainly, are holding boxes trying to get money because they can't get it from the government. So it's their way of getting enough money to pass to their friends in the villages to survive on.
Then, and as if they didn't need it, down came that tropical downpour that the monsoon that they were fearing would happen, because I can see in the pictures we've got here that on top of everything else, literally a downpour.
As the clouds were forming, as you said, and people with nowhere to live, nowhere to go, their houses totally gone, down came the rain, heavy rain, and they were rushing to get somewhere under a tree or whatever. But they were worried about disease, of course, when the monsoon rains came.
In the days that you were there, they were talking about 600 deaths and thousands of injuries and lots of missing people. The latest figure that I've seen is that at least 1,300 deaths and thousands of injuries and thousands more missing. Was anybody suggesting to you what the toll might be in the long run?
It was too early because the experts hadn't had a chance to go out to a lot of these, or couldn't get out to a lot of these villages. But as you know yourself, 1,300, and it's not even over, it can easily double. And under some of those big areas out in the countryside, and whole villages are gone. As I mentioned, 400 people, that's just one village. Some of the real outlying areas, I heard that even the aid agencies or the authorities haven't even gone to.
Have a couple of lasting memories you could share with us that you shot? Things that you shot that sort of summed up something about the whole situation?
After doing this for so long, what hits me is the resilience of people and the decency of the people. But they've lost everything and they're still so well-mannered, like offering you a cup of tea, for instance. There was one man, an old man, his house totally gone, sitting beside, late in the afternoon, praying.
On his prayer mat?
On his prayer mat.
I can see it, that shot now, yeah.
And it was very moving, and there he was, just sitting quietly on his own amongst all this rubble.
One of his 5 prayers for that day.
Yes. And one other sequence that I did late in the afternoon, after spending time with Save the Children, when they were giving out the supplies and the tarpaulin, this lady put it on top of her head, said, "Thank you, mister."
Thank you, mister.
And walked off down the track, back to start again. That's all she had left.